Welcome back, friends. So I just came back from Schwab's conference, and it was very interesting. Obviously, I met a lot of bulls. I also met a lot of bears, and there were a lot of good reasons to be worried about the market. And there are a lot of good reasons to be excited about the market as well. So I thought I'll try to share this information with you guys during our meetup. Hopefully, we can do that tomorrow. But I see there's a battle going on between Dublin Group and Fremont Group or the Sunnyvale Group. Let's just see how that battle works out. So Dublin Group is offering free food tomorrow. Let's see what Sunnyvale Group comes up with, maybe coffee or something. We'll see how that goes. But I'll see you guys tomorrow one way or the other. So thank you so much for keeping this super exciting. And I'll share what I learned with you at the Schwab conference as well with you guys. But today I want to talk about broadly about AI infrastructure play because we have a lot of earnings coming out and a lot of bullishness is starting to show up in market once again, which is good. But the problem is we saw big correction in July, right? I really shouldn't say big correction, but certainly was a decent side correction. I think Nasdaq fell well over 10%, and a lot of semiconductor names were down 20%, 30%, 40%. So there was a decent amount of correction in the market out there. So the question we got to be asking right now to ourselves is AI demand finally slowing? And we already saw people are talking about, well, that's not really true. Actually, AI demand is still intact, but we need some evidence. We need some data points. We need some assurity that that is indeed the case. And I think I found some good information, so I'm going to share that with you guys today. Hopefully, that will add some value. Now, before I begin, let me remind you guys, I'm not an investment advisor, so certainly don't act on anything I say. Take the data point, go do your own research, and if it makes sense, then take the trade. Otherwise, stay away from it. Number two, I use the same tools as you guys do. I use social media. I use earnings report. I use AI. And sometimes there could be some hallucination in numbers. So please understand, I don't have a research team fact checking every single number. I want to get a broad sense of where the market is going, and that is about it. I don't have any. So don't rely on every specific number. Okay. Wealth Summit is in October this year. So October 25th is the date. So hopefully all of you guys can come there. I'll try to set up a separate table. Maybe I'm thinking maybe do a little bit differently than what we did last year. Maybe a little bit more quieter place for those of you guys who want to discuss about some specific matters. We can have it interesting. And I'm trying to invite a lot of other people. Wealth Summit, where, for example, people who have construction projects, who are building sports facilities, stuff like that. So I'm trying to make it really interesting this year as well for those of you guys who are strictly interested in building a long-term wealth. So be really, really cool. All right. Go back to markets. So markets, well, many of you guys can say, well, this correction happened because of Leo, the hedge fund guy. And he's the guy very well followed by a lot of people. And the rally we saw last year after the semiconductors sold off, I think large part of that can be contributed to him. I think he got the market super excited and a lot of people jump in. In his case, he used 4x leverage and obviously he had to give it all away last week when the market corrected. So this is how these things played out. But I think the bigger picture we get actually from Korea, right? Because Korea market is one of the biggest market for semiconductors, and certainly that market is also heavily leveraged. That's why we have to be careful. And a lot of people ignore Korea market. They think it's just a big casino, and it is to a large extent. I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, it is one of the biggest market for semiconductors. So I can't just completely write it off. Let's give you some numbers. South Korea reported almost $99 billion in exports during July, the second highest monthly total in the country's history. So what did that really tell me, right? Even more impressive number was that semiconductor exports increased approximately 179% year over year to around 41 billion. And this is reflected in KOSPI, right? You can go there and see how the stock market is doing. There was a lot of enthusiasm, and that also contributed to a lot of leverage. But a lot of that underlying demand is actually coming from these numbers here. Exports to the United States climbed almost 70%, largely because of continued AI data center investment. Now, here's what I think. Now, these numbers are not some forecast, not leverage, they're not some projection. These are physical semiconductor products leaving factories and being delivered to customers. Just last week, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, now today Meta, reaffirmed that there's a lot of demand for AI. There's a lot of capital expense that is still happening. Well over $400 billion this year alone. So South Korea export numbers suggest that money isn't just being announced, it is actually being spent, which is very important. For example, if you've been following semiconductor trade, you probably have paid attention to Jensen Wong, as well as Michael Burry. Michael Burry is a guy who keeps saying that NVIDIA is not disclosing the fact that a lot of these GPUs are not really being installed; they're being sitting around somewhere. Um, but when I look at the Korean market, I see this large amount of actual chips moving from Korea to other places. So just kind of gives me a little bit of relief that Michael Burry might be actually wrong. So servers are being built, memory is being installed, networking equipment is being shipped. The supply chain is telling me that physical AI built out remains very, very strong. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every semiconductor stock is going to immediately rally. So you might be sitting on optical stocks or perhaps even memory stock, and you go like, oh my God, did I really made a mistake buying it high? Now, do we oftentimes make a mistake when we buy stocks when market is high? Of course we do. That's why we need to build skill set. We need to build patience. We need to kind of wait for the pullback. We cannot go jump into the market when market is super hot, when everybody is making money. And it makes you feel like stupid, like everybody else is making money. And here I am, my portfolio is not moving. But oftentimes that patience pays off. And so you have to be very careful when to jump into the trade. Now, another company I want to bring to your attention today is Kioxia. Now, Kioxia is one of those companies that is oftentimes not discussed. I don't think we have ever talked about it on our WhatsApp group. In matter of fact, even on our Discord group, and mainly because there's no reason for me to talk about it on Discord because we are mostly into Micron. So these other companies out there doesn't really bother me too much. I don't like taking too many trades. I do mostly concentrated bets. So if I want to bet on memory or storage, I'll stick with one company. Okay. So if you own SanDisk or planning to own SanDisk, especially because earnings are coming out, you probably should pay attention. That's why I want to make sure you have this information. Kioxia and SanDisk jointly manufacture NAND flash memory in Japan. They share manufacturing facilities. They co-develop the technology. They are partners for many, many years now. So when Kioxia talks about pricing, margins, or customer demand, people like you and me should naturally ask whether SanDisk is seeing perhaps the same thing. Now, according to Kioxia management, Kioxia continues seeing very strong demand for AI data centers. They're seeing improving NAND pricing and expect demand to remain ahead of supply through 2027. Now, this is exactly what Amazon told us. This is exactly what Apple told us. And here's another company that actually manufactures the product is telling us the same thing. Now, this caught my attention. Why? Because the market is still tend to think of NAND as a highly cyclical commodity business. This is one of the reasons why all of these companies are still being treated as trash. I mean, take a look at Micron or some of these other memory and storage companies. Their PEs are low, and you have to be very careful when PE is low because when PE is low, market is telling you that they don't believe that this earnings will continue. That's why the PE is low. So basically, the other way to think about it that these companies are priced for failure. But I think this time it's different, and now oftentimes people say that this time is different, but it never is. Uh, so I agree with that comment as well. The question is how much more time frame we have. And nobody really knows the answer to that question because, if you think about 2 years ago where we were with AI, there were a lot of talks about how it's going to be the biggest failure, how it's going to crash the market, all that stuff. Then came the next year, same set of fears. Then the next year, and then even this year, we have seen that fear in the market at least 2, 3 times. So nobody really knows the answer to that question. So I'm not saying this cycle can last forever. I'm just saying that people who are bears in this market, they are just as good at guessing as you and me are. That's all I'm really trying to say. So what is happening today? Every conversation today focuses on GPUs and CPUs, but GPUs and CPUs don't work alone, right? Every AI cluster also needs enterprise SSDs, training data sets, checkpoint storage, inference databases, vector databases. Every time AI usage increases, which I expect to increase 100 times over the next few years, storage demand is going to increase as well. That's why I believe we are moving into much broader AI infrastructure cycle than previous semiconductor cycle. So what am I expecting from SanDisk this week? Very simple, pricing. I want to know about pricing. If management says NAND pricing continue to improve, that's great. Demand for SSDs is AI customers continue buying storage faster than what market is expecting. Great. guidance. 2027 guidance is that's what matters at this point. If management believes demand will remain strong and the supply will be constrained, that is very bullish as well. Now, I'm not saying the stock is going to immediately rally right afterwards. In matter of fact, it might sold off. In matter of fact, we might see the stock jumping 15-20% this week before the earnings. Um, at the end of the day, expectations matters, valuations matter. But those are the three things that I'll be listening to, because that is what's going to tell me how does this trade looks like over time. Now, the bottleneck, we have talked about it, 2 years ago it was GPUs. That's why NVIDIA jumped a lot. Then it became memory. So you probably have participated in memory. And now we're seeing a lot of talk about moving data. I mean, yeah, you're making all these data centers. You have this memory, you have GPUs. But how do you really move the data? So modern AI cluster contains tens of thousands of GPUs. Those GPUs spend enormous amount of time communicating with each other. They need to talk to each other, right? Historically, that communication is done over copper. But as networking speeds continue increasing, copper begins running into physical limitations. More heat, power consumption problems, signal losses. That's why industry is increasingly moving towards optical networking. And we saw that hype earlier, but those stocks kind of got sold off. So instead of electricity, information is being transmitted using light. According to Lumentum CEO, manufacturing enough indium phosphide laser component is already becoming one of the biggest constraints facing future AI infrastructure. Now, think about that, what NVIDIA did. They recently announced $2 billion strategic investment both in Lumentum and Coherent, alongside long-term supply agreements. To me, that gives us an important signal. NVIDIA usually don't invest billions of dollars unless they believe future capacity will become constrained. They did something similar with advanced packaging. They did that with HBM memory. Now they're doing it with optics. History suggests NVIDIA tends to identify tomorrow's bottleneck before Wall Street does. Oftentimes, when I'm talking to people who work at NVIDIA or AMD or some of the other companies, I often refer to Jensen. I'm like, look, you don't need my advice. I think what you need is advice from your own CEO. Listen to Jensen. Listen to what he's talking about. Pay attention to what he is doing. Now, let's say if he says something about Coherent and you go invest in Coherent when the price is high, obviously you're going to be not happy every time there's a pullback. That's why it's important to acquire these stocks during the pullback. So I would not suggest that you go jump all in right when Jensen makes the announcement. But the point is, fundamentally, you want to identify the trend. People like Jensen, people who run large companies, they don't invest for 6 months, a year, 2 years. They're investing for the next decade. That is where your focus should be. So what I like to do is identify the trend. For example, when I was at the conference, I met a lot of people who were doing algo trading. They were talking about using AI to collect data. Oh, by the way, that's one thing I want to do starting after the Wealth Summit. So Wealth Summit is on October 25th. So this Wealth Summit, I'm working a lot of things on the background, and I want to bring AI research as part of the coaching program this year. Okay, I want to build a system to start building this research database to help you build conviction, and something that you can tweak on your own and play around with your own. So this is something I want to launch at Wealth Summit this year. Still working on it. I'm working with a couple of the guys. I'm not that good of an expert, so I'm hiring a couple of people who are expert in it, people who have millions of dollars worth of portfolio, and they claim they're doing well. I'm still vetting them. I'm still verifying them, see how that works out. But I'm using those people to build me a good system that I can share with everyone in our group as well. So that's the plan for this year. But anyhow, my main point was that I met a lot of people who were using AI, and they were doing a lot of algo trading. In matter of fact, Schwab conference was sponsored by CME. And one of the idea came out from them was, hey, um, you know, act on every single news, basically. They didn't really say it that way. That was the point they were trying to say. They're like, look, you hear something at 9 p.m. that you think going to have a negative impact on your market. Well, guess what? Market is closed. There's nothing you can do. But with us, you can make a trade on future, and you can hedge your portfolio. But I mean, if I start hedging my portfolio for every single news, what's going to happen? There are like hundreds of news throughout the year. I'm going to pay more money in hedging than I'll actually make in investing. So it doesn't really work for me. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. So there were a lot of people, they told me like, oh yeah, we hedge, but not for a long time. It's not really to hedge the portfolio. It's just to take advantage of news. So we are selling and buying futures on every single news because, we sell it and then we get back in. So nothing to do with our portfolio. We're just making money. So that was kind of interesting that I saw. So a lot of it looks like all of these people, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan Chase, they're going to start to do similarly and try to convince people to do more options, to do more trading, to generate more transactional revenue for them. And that is one industry I've been positive on over the last couple of years, that I think in this kind of market, in this kind of technology environment, these are the companies who are going to benefit the most. Like, I think they are probably, if I need to build a very less risky portfolio, I'll probably stick with one sector, finance, because I think these companies tend to do very well over a longer period of time. And if AI infrastructure is true, they're going to make money. If interest rate comes down, they're going to make money. If the mortgage industry comes back, they're going to make money. So they have so much tailwind. Anyhow, that's a topic we can talk more about that at the meetup. But the story is this, that NVIDIA invests for the future. NVIDIA invests for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And that is what I'm paying attention to. So when you connect all these dots, South Korea is telling me that chips are still shipping, right? We saw the data. Kioxia telling me that demand is very, very strong. And it was also been confirmed by Apple. It's been confirmed by Amazon. Lumentum is telling me that networking is becoming the next challenge. I mean, these are not three separate stories or three separate connections. They are different pieces of the same AI infrastructure built out. And that tells me something very important. AI opportunity is expanding. It started with GPUs, then it went to memories, then went to storage, and now it's networking, and then it's going to be optics. Eventually, it's going to move into power infrastructure, cooling systems, electrical equipment. Now you can get into, problem with us is we only have limited amount of capital. So it's not like we can be investing in everything, right? We only need one or two trades to make the money this year. But that's it. Like I can't, let's say if I have $100,000, I'm not going to go buy, one company from electrical, one from cooling, one from power, one from networking, one from optics, because then I get they're divided in so many places. I probably just need to pay attention to one or two companies, and when I feel like, okay, I made enough money, then maybe I can move back into something else. So this week is going to be super exciting. We have AMD earnings coming out. We have Arista Network coming out. SanDisk is coming out. Western Digital, I own Western Digital. So their earnings coming out. Those companies will either confirm or challenge the signal we have been discussing today and for the last few weeks in our WhatsApp group. Here's what I'm expecting. I expect AMD to talk about AI acceleration, demand just going through the roof. I expect Arista Network to discuss strong AI networking spending by hyperscalers. I expect SanDisk and Western Digital reinforce improving enterprise storage demand and healthy NAND pricing. And I will be carefully listening to any signs that customers are slowing down orders. Now, one argument you can talk about is that, hey, a lot of these orders that you're seeing from Korea, maybe they're advanced orders. Maybe those, this is the peak. And that was one conversation that we did talk about at the conference. A lot of smart people were discussing a lot of different angles, by the way. So that's why, sometime in our WhatsApp group, we get too bullish. I start to see a lot of positive, but oftentimes negatives are not discussed enough, which you have to be very careful with. So let's see. What can prove this AI trade wrong? There are risks. If hyperscalers unexpectedly slow down the AI capex, there could be reasons. The reason could be as simple as that investors are not happy. That could be the reason. But I don't think that's going to happen because more and more companies are starting to prove ROI. So it's starting to become easier to digest this capex. Then we have adoption issue. So that was another topic that people talk about. Are people adopting? Because we saw some fear around token cost, these Chinese models, security issues. So, if there are so many security issues, if I'm a client and I want to implement AI, is this the right time? Maybe I want to wait a year or two, let these issues kind of work out, and then I jump in. Right? Now it comes down to storage and memory. Then the question is, what about NAND pricing, right? What about if customers delay deployment? So that's one of the arguments Jensen is making, that a lot of these orders are there, but they're not being deployed. So he's expecting market to correct. So all those challenges are there. So I would not really blindly jump in it and just kind of focus on that. So just understand that market trades on sentiments. Supply chains reflect reality. So I really more focus on data, and that is what keeps me grounded. That's why you don't see me talking about too much negative stuff when market is down, because nothing has really changed in data. Like, when market goes down, I don't have any new data. It remains the same. So right now, the truth is the supply chain looks remarkably strong. Semiconductor exports remain near record level. Strong demand is there and is continued to improve. Like I said, optics could become the next major bottleneck, so pay attention to that. Um, I mean, to me, industry doesn't seem to be slowing down. And as an investor, when these kind of transitions happen, there are opportunities to make money. So just be very careful and you know pay attention to your position sizing, risk management, and take advantage of the market. Don't be scared of it, but take advantage of it. And that requires a system, that requires um, a little bit of think process, like how do you set it up. So if I can be of any help, you want to talk about this stuff, let's talk about it in person, show up to meet up. But remember, I'm not an investment advisor, so I can't tell you whether you should buy something or sell something. So as long as that is not a requirement, as long as you're not requiring that kind of advice, then I'm happy to debate it with you and help you point out some interesting things in the way you think about all of those things. So let's debate it together. So I'll see you guys tomorrow at the event. Um, and you can always reach out to me via taxcodeadvisors.com if I can be of any help. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you soon.